Hi there folks, well welcome back to my channel, and for this video I did say that I would talk about one of the books that I had came across while I was sorting through one of the many boxes of books I've had to sort through recently. But I will get onto that in just a moment. Before I do get onto that, if you enjoy my channel, if you enjoy my videos, if you click on the subscribe button, click on that notification bell, leave some likes, leave some comments, it's always really appreciated. It really does help the channel to grow and get the word out about the channel more. It's all about feeding the algorithm, really. So, recently I've been sorting through a lot of books I've had in boxes, that I've had in storage, all that sort of thing, and trying to get everything all kind of as it should be. And I actually came across a book that I had totally forgotten that I actually had a copy of. I'd actually been looking to get a copy of it, totally forgetting that I actually had one in storage. And that book is The Wallace by Blind Harry. Well, the edition that I've got is actually a copy of a translation from the 18th century by a guy called William Hamilton of Gilbert Field. Yeah, and this edition itself, I think I must have gotten this from Abbey Books down in Paisley. Because again, it's the actual RRP is $8.99, but on the inside cover, it's £4. So yeah, this would have been from Abbey Books. So I thought I'd talk about this and have a little discussion, especially with Burns Night coming up. And apparently Robert Burns is actually inspired by at least some of the work in this, especially for his writing. I think it's Scots Way. And so Blind Harry was a medieval poet. I don't think he actually wrote the poem down. I think he had somebody who listened to him reciting the poem, and that person essentially wrote the poem down. And yeah, that's how we have books or book editions of the poem itself. Probably a bit like what happened with Homer and like the writing down of poems like the Iliad or the Odyssey. So it was actually written originally in medieval Scots, which I have tried reading, because I had to try and read the Wallace in medieval Scots when I was doing my undergrad, which was in archaeology and Scottish literature. And I have to admit, I really seriously struggled reading it in medieval Scots. Yeah, people think that reading poetry written by Robert Burns or reading the works of William Shakespeare is difficult. No, reading like medieval poetry, whether it be in medieval English or medieval Scots, that takes up a few levels. So I think I'd read the first part of it, or at least like the first few pages, and I really seriously struggled with it and gave up. So I knew that there was essentially an 18th century translation, and I wanted to get a copy of it, and I obviously managed to find a copy of it in Abbey Books. Because I've noticed that when I was doing my undergrad, you could get copies of Blind Harry's The Wallace in medieval Scots, and I think there were some editions of like the translation, but in the 20 years since, it seems to have just disappeared off like the bookshelves. I've had a look in Waterstones, I've had a look online, and just doesn't seem to be anywhere. Maybe that's something I could try and look into rectify, as I have sort of done that with the works of Robert Tattenhill and Alexander Wilson. So Blind Harry was also known as Harry the Minstrel, and he lived from 1440 to 1493, so 15th century. And the Wallace was composed, I think it's about 150 years, 160 years after William Wallace's death. So yeah, a lot of time passed between Wallace's death and the actual composition of this poem. And it is very much like a romanticised, propagandic piece based around Wallace's life. Because I think around the time the Blind Harry was composing this, I think I don't remember what king it was. It was one of the Jameses, one of the Stuarts. Let's have a look. James IV. I think there was talk that there might be a truce between England and Scotland, and there was a bit of a backlash against the truce, or the possibility of a truce, and the Blind Harry composed the Wallace as a sort of like a reactionary piece against the apparent truce that was being talked about or suggested, and it was very much like a knee-jerk reaction, essentially going, like, what would Wallace think of this? Wallace wouldn't want this. So it is kind of quite a dark, but I could probably say it's been a fairly dark, propagandic piece of poetry. And the poem itself has actually gone on and inspired, as I was saying earlier on, poets like Robert Burns. But in most recent times, so within the past 30 years, this actually went on to inspire the writing of the script for a very famous movie. And that very famous movie was Braveheart. Even though Braveheart was actually a name used for Robert the Bruce, because it was after the Bruce's death, his heart was taken out and balmed and put in a lead lines casket, and was taken off on crusade by the Black Douglas, so James Douglas, and he I think it was just as he was riding into battle, he threw the casket at those he was fighting against and shouted, "Onward, brave heart," and it was subsequently killed in the battle, and that Bruce's heart was taken back to Scotland. So, but again, in modern culture, the term Braveheart has become associated with William Wallace because of the movie. But I think the movie itself was actually based on this translation, which is probably that bit easier for Randall Wallace to actually read and understand. Because I have read a wee bit of it myself, and even though it's definitely not in modern English, it is definitely more like an archaic English, or archaic poetic English. It's definitely a lot more understandable than the medieval poetic Scots, or the poetic medieval Scots that was used in the original. So again, if you can get a copy of this, so that's the 18th century translation by William Hamilton, I would definitely recommend getting a copy and having a look at it, because even though it's definitely a product at this time, it definitely gives an insight into the politics and culture of Scotland at that time, which could definitely be quite insightful and quite informative. So hopefully you'll find that video interesting. Hopefully you'll be intrigued by Blind Harry's Wallace. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.